kind of in this weird landscape. Obviously, normal times, the folks at UK would be kind enough to let me, take over a classroom or, maybe a large closet somewhere to put this up on the wall behind me and talk about it. But we're sort of stuck with what we've got. And it is a really disruptive environment, whether we all want to kind of admit it or not. So I'll just dive right in and talk a little bit about competition and innovation, because I think they're actually tied quite tightly together. And then we can take some questions and do all that afterwards. And in between all of this too, I've broken this up to have a 5-minute video so you can have a bio break or whatever you need to do. All right, so this slide should be titled February 2020 or March 2020 or somewhere around there, right? Where we all were sitting in our proverbial boardrooms thinking, yeah, whatever, there's this pandemic thing in some other foreign land. It's not going to bother us or have anything to do with us. And I think kind of little did we know that it was really going to shake up essentially everything that we are doing and how we're kind of living. And so I won't spend too much time on that because we're all going through it in real time. But I will skip forward to somebody who we all know, and a lot of us, especially in the early, middle, and even later stage entrepreneurial circles, respect a lot, is a guy named Elon Musk. And this idea around competition and what it means to compete is also really transposed in one particular big theme, which is around innovation and what that actually means. And his statement around failing is all about trying again and again and again and again repeatedly, because you can't really measure something that is as being a success unless you've screwed something up, right? So, you get an F in one of your classes with Christine, and then you get an A, and so you understand, the clear difference between doing well and doing poorly. But the work environment is no different. I think what happens is competitors are starting to now kind of push this as a necessity for all businesses of all sizes and of all kinds. It doesn't even matter what the industry is. You could be an agro major, you could be a business major, you could be a history one like myself, you could be somebody in the tech world already, or a computer science degree. If you are not busy trying to break things, it is going to be problematic for you. So when we talk about innovation, or when I try and talk about innovation to people, what I like to focus on are that it is its own distinct process. This isn't like building product necessarily, right? Where you have an agile development cycle or a waterfall development cycle, and you go through and you tinker a little bit. Those are iterative designs. That's a very, look up the definition when you get time. Iteration is one thing. Innovation is something completely different. And this is really about adopting an ideology or a way to kind of live the business, if you will. So this is the part where you read the bottom and you're supposed to, try to be okay, why is he telling jokes already? This is funny. And what I mean by that is there are essentially 10 elements that I've broken out as far as the you want to call it, however your corporate mantra you want to call it, around what you should be doing competitively and why it should be happening. So some of these are examples, and I'll just kind of run through them pretty quickly. You want to be looking for networks. So if you're trying to compete with other businesses, sometimes it helps to collaboratively work with your competitors, known as frenemies, if you want to call them that, like sort of friendly enemies, or networks inside of the business itself, or creating additional networks that you can utilize. The human brain is kind of like the pinnacle of this tool set. It is all based on networks and growing them. Errors or fail fast. We just talked about that. So again, I won't kind of repeat too much. Reuse or repurpose. This is kind of like a quick poll or whatever. You guys can raise your hands. Has anybody ever seen the Apollo 13 movie, or they know what happened there? So I don't have to go into too much detail on that, but basically these guys were set to land on the moon for the third time. They get up there, something happens dramatically bad with the capsule, and now they're stuck, essentially lost in space, and they're gonna breathe in their own carbon monoxide if they don't do anything to kind of change the air that they have, and at least expel it outwards away from the capsule so they don't essentially asphyxiate themselves and kill themselves and be running around the moon forever. But they had to use or repurpose things that were there in order to scrub the air and get all of that out. So they had like their socks, they had like duct tape, they had, they had excess energy that they had to expel for certain other things like the lights. So they shut off the lights for 3 days, right? Like they had to do all of these things in order to just get back. And so all businesses also too, in an effort to be competitive, have all this reusable or repurposable inventory, items, knowledge, intellectual property, and that's something that you should be looking at as a way to remain competitive. So you tried something in the past that didn't work, doesn't mean you don't ever do it again. It means you can go back and dust it off and try it again. At different points in time, they will let you be more competitive or less. So you want to work towards that. Darwinism is kind of like that first slide we saw with the big wrecking ball coming through, but you can apply that to any of your competitors who are there as well. They are going to keep coming at you, and it's sort of this do or die, fight or flight mentality for the business to be competitive itself, right? You've got to be thinking about this as an element. Collaboration kind of fits with network, but it's a little bit different in the sense that you collaborate with people maybe around a project or around, hey, we're going to take on these guys competitively. How do we do that? What's the right way for us to do that? Chance encounters. Many of you may or may not know that penicillin was an accident. So it just spilled into the wrong petri dish, and out came this incredible solution that has probably saved 500 million lives or maybe more over the last 70 odd years since its discovery. And adjacent possibilities. I love this example for Slack. Does anybody use Slack or use Slack for work? I used to use it all the time. We're now using Microsoft Teams, but whatever. Slack originally was a gaming company, and they were in that space competing away. And the investors came in and said, you really need to figure out how to have a really good chat app because we've invested in a bunch of other gaming companies, and if that doesn't work, the games end up being bad. The game was terrible, but they built the best chat app, like better than Discord, at least at the time, than anybody else. And the investors are like, you know what? Why don't you just shut down the game and go do that, and we'll give you however much money you need. And of course, now they're a multi-billion-dollar company that's probably going to go public if they haven't already, and they're not doing gaming anymore. They're doing messaging for businesses and charging a nice living. In order to be competitive, you definitely need people who have hunches, and hunches are things that are built up over time. Even Darwin, even Newton, with the apple falling on his head, Darwin, writing about Darwinism in his little shack in the Galapagos, right? He had ideas that were built up over a series of other ideas underneath them, and only when it was ready to sort of be hatched was that the sort of the inspirational moment that occurred for him, and obviously now for the world that we understand is defined by nature. So that was built up on hunches, on ideas that were built up over time. Competitively, you've got to sort of keep doing this. So if you're looking at the list along the left, the bullets, this is like items you should be doing every month, right, as a business in order to remain competitive. And then the last one is if you can build a business around either a point solution or what I like to call platforms. GPS satellites would be the ultimate example. It was originally built by the US government for military purposes. Many of us know the story already, so I won't bore us. But then it was opened up for commercial use. And now today, everywhere we go with this or on our watch or whatever, we are tracking ourselves, tracking others, and in relation to it all. And it's all built off of that platform that's just highly scalable. So those kinds of things will inevitably, as elements, like if you were going to look at this and say, what are the competitive business architecture I have to have from innovation standpoint to be competitive with others? This is like your periodic table. That's how you should think about this. Okay, a lot of people are worried about competitors and whether it's a good or a bad thing. And I'm here to tell you that if you don't have any competition, it is incredibly likely that you probably don't have a business, or not a very big one. And we'll go over those quickly. So investors want competition because for them it means that there's a market that they can attack, or a part of a market, a very large market that they can go after. And the reason that that makes sense to them is they worry about cost, right? So if you're creating a new market, that sounds like a very expensive thing to do. And in reverse, if there's also a market that's already there, you don't need to spend a lot of money educating that market. So when Apple came out with the touchscreen, right, device, that wasn't their idea originally. It was their idea to morph it into a phone, but Samsung and many others were working on similar items. Palm Pilots were available, for those of you who are alive long enough to remember that ugly piece of hardware with the silly little stylus that broke every time you pulled it in and out. And so, again, these were like, this was an iterative change. This wasn't necessarily an innovative or a logarithmic change. The App Store was probably something that became much more on the innovative cycle later on. And then you're going to need all these competitive forces to both make your company better, to force you to innovate, and having those other competitive companies allows, again, that creation of a network, be it friendly competition or not. And you're eventually going to need outside advisors and outside help that's already educated in that market to be more competitive for yourself. So you see a lot of times people's CVs, right? Their resumes, it'll say like, they worked at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and, and Barclays and some other financial institution. And the reason that they've shuffled different places is not just because of money, but because they've gained some expertise that the other competitive business now wants or needs. So this idea that competition is, we're doing things different and we're so, better and newer and greater. Yeah, but it's really hard to judge where that's helpful to you as a company when you're kind of getting started. So I would caution you to be, especially when you're pitching investors and others like that, to shy away from this part. The investors are, trust me, they are looking for this. They want it. They want to see that it's there. So how do you do that? Like, how do you get your head around the competitive thing and what does that all mean? And I think it starts with the mindset that we talked about on the innovative side, but then there's some real tactical things you can do day in and day out. I'm old enough that we used to take like brown paper bags and put them over books. I don't know if we still do that now. That's not a thing? All right. Well, anyway, when we used to resell the books, if you could return them and they looked pretty and bright and new, you covered them with a brown paper bag and like a tape, and then friends drew all sorts of disgusting things on them, and then you could return the book for new and get most of your money back. But I'm using this metaphor at least to just say like the whole idea around killing some assumed truths for your business will also make you more competitive, right? So a lot of businesses go in, they get very comfortable doing the same thing kind of in a repetition fashion. But if they're not constantly looking at how they can undo their own business, trust me, your competitors are looking at exactly trying to do that. So it's better for you to try and kill your own assumed truth than for them to kill it. And what does that mean? I was kind of looking for like a socially distanced slide for this, but it was so hard to find one. But the theme along the bottom around being more competitive is also around prioritization and then reprioritization. How do you start one way and then shift because you need to reprioritize to go after something else? It's a recognition of what's happening competitively, right? You're not going to be able to do that unless you spend time sort of religiously going over this. Okay, once a week we're going to have a meeting about priorities. What are the priorities for this week? What did we get done? What's still waiting to be accomplished? And what do we need to like move up to the top? Okay. This is the part where I'm going to probably screw up a little bit technically, but we're going to try. This is all about feedback loops. I'm going to let you guys watch a little video for a few minutes. But the thing that you want to be looking for is this concept around mutual casual feedback. And the video will do a much better job of explaining that than I will. And if I need to turn up my sound, tell me. Can you guys hear?
Yeah, we can do it.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. When your band is trying to perform, feedback is an annoying obstacle. But in the grand orchestra of nature, feedback is not only beneficial, it's what makes everything work. What exactly is feedback? The key element, whether in sound, the environment, or social science, is a phenomenon called mutual causal interaction, where X affects Y, Y affects X, and so on, creating an ongoing process called a feedback loop. And the natural world is full of these mechanisms, formed by the links between living and non-living things, that build resilience by governing the way populations and food webs respond to events. When plants die, the dead material enriches the soil with humus, a stable mass of organic matter, providing moisture and nutrients for other plants to grow. The more plants grow and die, the more humus is produced, allowing even more plants to grow, and so on. This is an example of positive feedback, an essential force in the buildup of ecosystems. But it's not called positive feedback because it's beneficial. Rather, it is positive because it amplifies a particular effect or change from previous conditions. These positive or amplifying loops can also be harmful, like when removing a forest makes it vulnerable to erosion, which removes organic matter and nutrients from the earth, leaving less plants to anchor the soil and leading to more erosion. In contrast, negative feedback diminishes or counteracts changes in an ecosystem to maintain a more stable balance. Consider predators and their prey. When lynx eat snowshoe hares, they reduce their population. But this drop in the lynx's food source will soon cause their own population to decline, reducing the predation rate and allowing the hare population to increase again. The ongoing cycle creates an up and down, wave-like pattern, maintaining a long-term equilibrium and allowing a food chain to persist over time. Feedback processes might seem counterintuitive because many of us are used to more predictable linear scenarios of cause and effect. For instance, it seems simple enough that spraying pesticides would help plants grow by killing pest insects, but it may trigger a host of other unexpected reactions. For example, if spraying pushes down the insect population, its predators will have less food. As their population dips, the reduced predation would allow the insect population to rise, counteracting the effects of our pesticides. Note that each feedback is the product of the links in the loop. Add one negative link, and it will reverse the feedback force entirely. And one weak link will reduce the effect of the entire feedback considerably. Lose a link, and the whole loop is broken. But this is only a simple example, since natural communities consist not of separate food chains, but networks of interactions. Feedback loops will often be indirect, occurring through longer chains. A food web containing 20 populations can generate thousands of loops of up to 20 links in length. But instead of forming a disordered cacophony, feedback loops in ecological systems play together, creating regular patterns just like multiple instruments coming together to create a complex but harmonious piece of music. Wide-ranging negative feedbacks keep the positive feedbacks in check, like drums maintaining a rhythm. You can look at the way a particular ecosystem functions within its unique habitat as representing its trademark sound. Ocean environments, dominated by predator-prey interactions and strong negative and positive loops stabilized by self-damping feedback, are powerful and loud with many oscillations. Desert ecosystems, where the turnover of biomass is slow and the feedbacks loop through dead matter, are more like a constant drone. And the tropical rainforest, with its great diversity of species, high nutrient turnover, and strong feedbacks among both living and dead matter, is like a lush panoply of sounds. Despite their stabilizing effects, many of these habitats and their ecosystems develop and change over time, as do the harmonies they create. Deforestation may turn lush tropics into a barren patch, like a successful ensemble breaking up after losing its star performers. But an abandoned patch of farmland may also become a forest over time, like a garage band, growing into a magnificent orchestra.
Okay. I'm going to try and skip out of that and skip back to the deck. Oops. There we go. All right, so did everybody kind of generally understand what the purpose of that video was? There's feedback loops that you need to pay attention to, both within the business to remain competitive, within your network to remain competitive, and then kind of really far outside of it, right? And then there's the things that you can do to start to influence how that network and how that feedback loop is getting back into your product. And again, kind of push forward competitively or not. But if you're not doing enough of that feedback looping, both as an internal structure that you get used to doing, and then externally, and of course, in a larger scale, you're going to miss this mutual causal feedback component, and that is going to take you way down in the competitive cycle, so to speak. So there's a lot of product ways to deal with this. There's some sales ways to deal with it. There's some customer service ways to deal with it. Kind of each part of the business funnel has an opportunity to participate. Okay, this is one of my more favorite ones. Yes, no, maybe. So we live in a world right now where there's like a ton of maybe and not a lot of yes and no's because we don't really know what the right answers are. But maybe is okay. And so I kind of caution both manager, teacher, student, pitching your new business and the rest of it, that it's okay to actually give that as an answer, an and or an if, as long as you have some time constraints kind of basically wrapped in and around. Oops. All right, who knows what cover and what song this is? What album? I don't know if we're like allowed to let people talk or how we can let them talk.
Pink Floyd, right?
Yes. All right, well the song that I'm referencing in the quote is Time. We talked about the 10 competitive kind of innovative elements that you want to have on a couple previous slides. And if I was going to point to, yeah, there we go. Christine got it. Some other people got it good. If I was going to point to an 11th element, right, similar to like the universe that we live in, we've got, front and back, left and right, up and down, and then you've got the fourth element being time wrapped in with those three things that make a three-dimensional universe. Same thing would be true with these 10 elements for what you need to look for competitively within your business to innovate, and adding in time. I used to start my product meetings every week with like a Bluetooth speaker with this playing, and it just drove the product completely batty after a while, but whatever, I was a boss, doesn't matter. All right, let's get to the next one. And then this kind of brings us into like tactical zone. This is like my worst, I hate this slide, but I always feel like I need to do one for whatever particular reason. I should probably disband from the idea completely, but to talk about, what you can do, right? What you can do to remain competitive and how that should work. So I'm a big product person. Product market fit's really important to me. I think if you nail that, you end up with amazing products like Tesla, like Apple, like so many other businesses we see out there today that have just identified the persona for who they're targeting incredibly well. And it's kept them competitive because they're laser focused in on that. One of the things that they do, and they don't really talk about all that much, is what we call first-time user experience. And it's the same thing, like if you think about it, you install an app, you open it up, you use it for the first time, it's either awesome and you're going to keep doing it, or like 90+% of the time you'll install it, you'll use it, and then you'll just dump it and get rid of it. And the reason we tell people to spend tons of resource and energy on this is you only get that first chance to make a first impression. So like literally if you have technical debt, you have other things that you think competitively you have to have in order to have a more full product, I would argue, don't even waste your time. Like don't waste your resources, don't waste your time, put all that garbage on the shelf. And unless it's blood, smoke, or fire, meaning somebody's bleeding, something is smoking, or there's a fire with it and it is absolutely critical to the business staying alive, you don't need to pay attention to it. Obsess over first-time user experience. It's so important to be competitive that way. The second bullet on backstops, this is kind of an easy one, given the fact you're all stuck at university. I got my degree already, ha ha ha. But anyway, you want to encourage people to learn and to keep doing that and have other people learn other disciplines. It'll make you a lot more competitive. And of course, you'll be reusing resources, being people, for multiple tasks, which is a great way to do that. Resource allocation, this is kind of like the plug for my company, but it's not meant to be, so don't hear it that way necessarily. It is something that I've always advocated for, whether it is the business I'm working for now or others, is get the A players, the people who are on your team doing the A work. They're not going to want to go to the competitive companies if they're satisfied with the work that they're doing, regardless of pay. That's always important, but it's not the only thing. And people want to feel like they're having an impact. So if you can give them all the really good, exciting stuff to do, let companies like mine and others handle all the, sort of the trash work, if you will, all the dev operations and building the software and QA testing it and all the rest of that. Like, don't spend your time creating intellectual property around things that you don't need to. Outsource certain solutions. You're going to move a lot faster. You're going to be a lot more competitive. The last one around agility is Agile as a development process. I don't know how many businesses are run still on other development software processes, but Agile is kind of like the bleeding edge version of how to do this and how to do this well. But don't be married to it necessarily as well. Like I think what we're finding out with COVID now is you can tear some of those existing infrastructures apart and then you can take them and put them back together. So even like at our company, we use something called a Wagile, which is a combination of waterfall and agile to do software development because it's easier for us to fit those pieces together and to produce a quicker result for the clients. And then the last 3 points, hey, whatever got you here isn't what will take you further. Time, again, that element around time is so important. You can apply it to any one of the 10 bullets that I had in that space and just keep readdressing it. Make it part of what you do as a meeting. Talk about time. How much time are we spending on different things? Where do we want to spend our time? Where are our clients spending time? Competitively, where are the competitors spending time? What are they doing? It doesn't mean you have to follow them, but it just means you acknowledge what's going on with that specific item. And then the last piece is to get some outside advisors, get some other people in there to take a look at this. I've seen so many products, so many services, so many combinations of products and services. I've worked in hardware, I've worked in software, I worked with a company that did hardware and software. And it's terrible to say this, but when people create their own little insular network, right, with no feedback loops or not enough, they have drank the Kool-Aid and the inventive level goes way down, the worry level goes way up, the political, let's play politics with one another goes through the roof. And sadly, at that point, everybody's kind of drank the Kool-Aid, which is a terrible metaphor for something that happened about 30 or 40 years ago in Jonestown, French Guiana. But I wish I was kind of joking, and I'm not. Unfortunately, I see this kind of like happen time and time again. So in an effort to remain competitive, this is something you've got to kind of crush and move out of the way. Okay, that's it. I'm available. Obviously, the business is there. Somebody really wants to go that direction. This is not a pitch for them. This is really meant to just give you guys an education, but I wanted to give you a sense of who I was, where I work, and obviously feel free to reach out.